Welcome to CivilNet. It's election day in Armenia. We're electing a president for the next 5 years, and we are faced with a whole series of questions about the process, the background, the outcome, the implications. And here to help us ask more questions and maybe even some answers is Alex Sardar, who has lived in Armenia nearly 10 years, who has worked in development for all of that time, development, legislative strengthening, and who has answers to all of these complex problems, yes?
I hope so. I don't think so, but I hope so.
Alex, you know, when I look back to where we were, even in May and June, after the parliamentary elections, there was a clear winner, the ruling party. There seemed to be clear non-coalition members, I don't want to call them opposition, but alternatives ostensibly. Mm-hmm. And that brought us all the way to December, when we thought that perhaps just like the parliamentary election was an interesting contest, that the presidential election too would be an interesting contest. And then in December it became clear that not only do we not have a unified candidate, we just don't have any significant candidates, with possibly a few exceptions. Today we have the president running for re-election. We have Rafi Hovhannisyan challenging him, former foreign minister, head of the Heritage Party. We have Hrant Pakradyan, former prime minister, challenging him. We have Barur Hayrigyan, former Soviet dissident, challenging. We have a political scientist, Andreas Lugasyan, who is today in the
23rd day.
23rd day, 29th day, I think the whole extent of the campaign. A long time.
Long time, more than 20 days.
A hunger strike,
mm-hmm.
which he said he would conduct throughout the campaign. We have a literary expert of sorts. We have Arman Melikyan, former foreign minister of Arapal. Mm-hmm. Have I left anyone out?
I think that's it.
And what do we have? Do we have a plural field? Do we have an artificial field? What do we have?
You know, at first glance, we do have a plural field. But in order for one to understand what's happening, you have to take a few steps back and really get a sense of what happened in the last 10 months since May to figure out how we ended up in this field. I would say there are, if not two, at least one significant, as you say, challenger to President Sarkisyan, and certainly that adds a sense of competition to these elections. But I think that's the key here, that if the May elections were pluralistic in the sense that there was real competition, but more importantly, that people believed and saw that they felt that there was real competition.
At least at the end they did, even at the beginning they
Essentially, didn't. Exactly. I think now there is a high level of distrust as to whether there's real competition going on. Now, that could be because of a number of reasons, whether we sort of attribute it to the sense of, I would say, this culture of gossip in Armenia that surrounds and revolves around politics, the way politicians come and go in terms of their standing in political competition, in electoral competition.
In terms of their real political engagement in between elections.
In between elections, their real ambitions in terms of their political standing, in terms of their longevity, in terms of their consistency. I think those are all factors in how voters, the electorate, views elections. Now, with all that said, we also have to come back to the reality that you have an incumbent who is dominating the field, and dominating the field. Some observers have said unfairly so, through administrative resource domination, use, media skewing. You know, the media field is quite skewed, and also, why not, the level of the ebbs and flows in political apathy in this country. You know, that also contributes to that ability to dominate the political field.
And the sense of inevitability.
Yes.
I mean, some of the things that we've inherited from the Soviet system, unfortunately, we've inherited the bad rather than some of the good, mm-hmm. is that sense of inevitability, that they're going to win because they're in power, and yeah. they use that,
yeah.
and we believe it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have what we have, that even, Rafi Hovhannisyan, who was probably the significant opposition, his campaign slogan is, "It is possible." It seems as if that's the battle he's fighting, to convince people that, it really is possible.
Yeah, and Salpi, the interesting thing is that, again, that sense of inevitability also comes and goes based on how the elections are administered in this country. I mean, in May, less people, if you talk to people on the street, they would say, no, it is possible to get a parliament that is diverse politically, right? Now, when you speak with people, they're resigned. They're resigned to the fact that it's going to be, the incumbent, and they're not going to be able to do anything about it. So it really, again, comes back down to the level of information, the level of engagement, the kind of engagement that voters are seeing from political parties. And one of the things that you and I have talked privately about is that I think if we take this as a long-term process of development, one of the things that has happened this election cycle is that we see a very different kind of campaign culture emerging from Mr. Sarkisian's camp in reaction to what is happening perhaps in Rafi Hovhannisyan's camp, but also all of these other Andreas Ugasian's hunger strike has also touched the nerve, in the electorate. So there's something shifting, something happening, but you're right, that people still think that there is a sense of inevitability here.
And even that shift that you're talking about, a lot of it is emotional, a lot of it is based on passion. None of it is talk of policy, which I think feeds that sense of inevitability. Since nobody is talking about what they're going to do, the incumbent is certainly not talking about what he has done. And so you think, okay, if the discussion is not about policy and vision and direction, if it's just about people, well, anywhere the incumbent has an advantage, especially if you're going to use admin resources and other things, and so it's a done deal.
Sure.
No policy discussion.
No policy discussion, and unfortunately, here's the thing that I have a very hard time with. When you speak with politicians, policymakers, those who actually make decisions about people's lives in this country, they will tell you will very often hear, well, people don't understand what we're talking about when we talk about policy. They don't really need to know what we're talking about.
You know what, I do understand.
Absolutely, and that is that, that also, when we talk about political culture, that's part of the political culture that we're talking about. The electorate is smart, gets it. It doesn't matter if you're talking about high policy or, local ordinance.
Exactly.
They understand how it affects their lives. And unless that level of engagement happens between elections, and I think that's the key. Between elections, then you cannot expect them to really engage substantively during elections. And politicians do take advantage of that reality in Armenia.
Absolutely. And a little while ago when you were talking about the sense of pluralism, many of these candidates are people you only see election to election.
Right.
They're not real political players in between, so that even if there's a sense of inevitability about who's going to come out the winner, if I believe that the guy that I want to back has a chance of keeping my vote, and if I believe that he's going to do something with that percentage that he receives, even if it's not a winning percentage, I'm more likely to go out and say, hey, this is somebody I'm going to back, because for 5 years, part of his voice will be my voice.
Exactly.
But we don't have that.
We don't have that. And when we do have it, when we do have political parties like Heritage, like, on an ad hoc basis, even the Republicans, or when you see glimmers of hope between elections, what generally happens in Armenia, it happens en masse. So political parties speak to the population en masse. They do not engage with people based on their
in the town halls and the little
specific issues, specific geographies. There's no community engagement on a communal level, or a smaller communal level, and that's what you get. So during the elections, people also deal with the political parties in one broad brushstroke. They don't actually engage with them individually or on a policy level. So it's about. In fact, today, it was kind of funny because right before I came here, I was at a polling location observing, and I heard someone say, a voter came in and said, I hope our people's condition will improve after this election. What that means, how that breaks down into daily life, starting tomorrow morning, no one ever engages on with people, and that is the key.
I want to ask about that. Let's talk, but before that, tell me what the polling stations look like.
Empty. I was really surprised at the numbers. I mean, I was just looking at almost 50% as of 5 o'clock. The CEC, the Central Election Commission, is saying that 50% of the electorate's been out. I was at 13 precincts. I counted all of 23 voters in a matter of about 2.5 hours, where I went to these locations, and I was walking, around. So I'm quite surprised that the turnout is that high from the CEC side so soon. Now, mine is anecdotal, theirs is not, so I can't really say much about that. But very, very empty and quiet compared to the parliamentary elections, certainly. And so what I saw is that. I've been hearing reports from other places, from Artashat, for instance, some serious violations and so on, but those will come out in time.
Two observations. One is that Tanya Sahagian, another VPAT who used to work with you, has worked with us, posted a couple of pictures on Facebook that I think we've reposted with a picture of the entrance to a precinct in May, parliamentary elections, and today.
Yes.
Identical, you can see, it's the same setup. If there were 12 people in the frame in the first picture, there's nobody in the frame in today, which is an interesting comment.
Yeah.
If we're going to talk about where we go from here, if we're going to talk about the inevitability, somebody's going to win, and it's probably the incumbent. And so tomorrow, we're going to have a president with a new 5-year term who is perhaps a lame duck, but not just yet. And he has the opportunity to do some things, to make some changes. And in fact, there were some people in the diplomatic corps who were trying to convince me that this is it. These 5 years are going to be different from the last 5 years because it is a second term. I'm not convinced, only because politics in Armenia don't work that way. He is no less or more dependent on the public in his second term than he was in the first. It's still a power elite that elects the powerful. Having said that, is there a chance that we will see changes in the second term, and what is it that we should be pushing for?
There's always a chance that we will see changes, and there's always the hope that we will. I think one thing that we have to be cognizant about, and we have to acknowledge, is that politics in Armenia don't work the way politics in other places work. And that's not to say that Armenia is unique in that way, but it is not certainly the way Western political observers should approach politics in Armenia. So the conventional wisdom here is that a lame duck president will worry about his legacy. And my retort to that is, the legacy is not so much how that president will go down in history, but what happens after the next 5 years. How do they retain, safeguard whatever personal interests as well as the legacy issues that they have? So I think there's a more
Slightly
complex, sort of paradigm that one needs to go through to really understand how these politicians work here. With that said, I think there is a real opportunity for substantive engagement, if not to shift policy, if not to push for a new kind of policy, at least for a new process for policymaking. So if we're not looking at the outcome of the process, but we're looking at the process at the very least. If civil society, if citizens, this is the big thing. If citizens actually engage on a substantive level, and they have been. I don't want to discount what they've been doing over the last 5 years. But if they continue and really build on that, we might see the results change because the process is changing. And the thing that is different about this next 5 years, these next 5 years, and we've talked about this last elections, before then, in the interim. More and more people have access to alternative information, alternative ways of thinking about the information that they're receiving. And if the last 5 years of the Sarkisian presidency was not fully laced with that access to information and access to technology.
Right, it got there, but it wasn't at the beginning.
Exactly. Now we have 5 years of doing that, or the ability to do that for the full five-year term. And not only him, but his party and all the other parties that are in parliament, because there's going to be a whole bunch of contingent processes that are going to be going on. And so I think there is hope, but it really, it comes back to the very first point we made, that unless there is real trust, well, there's trust, not real trust, but trust in the process and in some very basic rules of engagement, then it's very hard for us to think about how the next 5 years are going to be any different than the last 5 years.
And regardless of what those in power, whether in the executive or in the legislative, do, we won't even talk about the judicial, we'll leave that alone. Regardless of that, at the end of the day, we have choices, and we're stuck really between two approaches and attitudes. One is that the power is, really it's a power monopoly, ruling party, president, judicial, legislative, and so there's nothing to do. The other way to look at this, and you've said this in the past, is that yes, those with power are interested in protecting their power.
Right.
But there is this space outside of that that is not theirs, that comes close to mine, where it is possible to push them towards change.
Right.
If the media does its job and does the kind of monitoring and following you say, if we use that public space for assembly, for speech, for media. So really we're kind of stuck between that, right? The cynical approach of forget it and wanting to take the process in hand.
In hand. I mean, look, you know, having come from the tradition that I come from and the life experiences that I've had, that you've had, that we've all had, you know, to me, when you wake up in the morning, tomorrow morning when we wake up, what is the alternative? I mean, if the alternative is the cynical sort of, you know, I'm going to throw my hands up and let them take over my life, it doesn't work for me. You know, I might as well just pack up and turn off the lights and go home, right? I mean, that's the reality of it. So I'm not sure if people, and let me also say, we have to also recognize that that's what some people have decided to do over the last 5 years.
Absolutely.
I mean, we have rates of emigration that are unprecedented during Mr. Sarkisian's presidency. And so we have to acknowledge that, but we also have to understand that there is more and more people are recognizing that they have to choose that the other alternative, that they have to, you know, gather in Mashtots Park, they have to gather up in Tegut, they have to, I mean, they really have to come together around the death of a military doctor. You know, these are real issues that really mobilize people. What we have to do now is understand that it doesn't take a crisis for that to happen. It has to be
planned, strategized,
inertia, and really just, you know, consistently mobilizing activists and regular citizens and children and mothers and people who don't work, people who don't have access to the internet. It has to be that, so that space is safeguarded. I'm not saying that mobilizing people means that you come out against the government. That's not it. You offer alternatives to the policies that exist. Or you actually say to the government, we like your policy.
Yes.
Let's go with it. We'll support it. We'll make sure that it's implemented properly.
Yeah, if we were going to turn off the lights and go home, we would have done it a while back this year. We had plenty of opportunities. But we're here, CivilNet is here. We're going to be continuing to talk all night with all sorts of interesting people from around the globe. We're going to take advantage of the time difference, of Armenia being ahead. We'll wait for the Central Electoral Commission to come up with some sort of numbers at midnight. And we hope you'll stay with us. Thank you, Alex Sardar.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching us on CivilNet, and stay with us. We're going to be showing you reports from various regions in Armenia. I think it's the Lori region that's next. And then after that, we'll be carrying on a Skype conversation with a very interesting person in Washington, D.C. Stay tuned, stay with us on CivilNet, and thank you for watching CivilNet.